You know, people always ask me how I got through it all. How I managed to keep going when everyone around me treated me like I was nothing. Like I was just in the way. And honestly, for the longest time I believed them. I actually thought maybe they were right. It started about 3 years ago. My grandmother had just passed away, and I was dealing with the grief, you know? She was the only family I had left who actually cared about me. My parents died when I was young, and my grandmother raised me. She was everything to me. When she died, I felt so lost, so alone. But the thing is, my grandmother had this beautiful old house, Victorian style, with these gorgeous bay windows and original hardwood floors. She'd lived there for over 50 years, and it was filled with memories. I thought, I thought maybe I could stay there, fix it up, keep her memory alive somehow. That's when my cousins showed up, Derek and Linda. I hadn't seen them in years, not since I was a kid. They barely visited my grandmother when she was alive, maybe once or twice a year for holidays. But the moment she died, suddenly they were very interested in the family. I remember that first day they came to the house. I was sitting in my grandmother's old rocking chair, going through some of her photo albums, and they just walked right in. Didn't even knock. Derek had this smug look on his face, and Linda was already eyeing the antique furniture like she was appraising it. "Oh, hey there," Derek said, not even trying to hide his annoyance at seeing me. "We didn't expect you to still be here." Still be here? It had only been a week since the funeral. I'm going through her things," I said quietly. "There's so much to sort through." Linda rolled her eyes. "Well, you'll need to wrap that up soon. We're putting the house on the market next month." I felt like someone had punched me in the stomach. "What? You can't just— This is my grandmother's house. She loved this place." "Was your grandmother's house," Derek corrected. "And unfortunately she didn't leave a will. So according to the law, the property gets divided among her closest living relatives. That's me and Linda." "But what about me?" I asked. "I'm her granddaughter. I lived with her for 6 years after college because I couldn't afford rent anywhere else, and she said she didn't mind. She said this would always be my home." They both laughed. Actually laughed, like what I'd said was the funniest thing in the world. "Listen," Linda said, her voice dripping with fake sympathy. "We get it. You're attached to this place, but you're not actually family, are you? You're just— what's the word? Oh, right. A step-granddaughter. Your father was her stepson, not her biological son." The words hit me like a slap. I mean, I knew technically that was true. My grandfather had married my grandmother when my dad was 12. But she'd never treated me any differently. She'd always called me her granddaughter, never added the step part. She'd bragged about my college graduation, sent me birthday cards, listened to me cry about bad breakups. "She never made me feel like I wasn't really her granddaughter," I whispered. "Well, that's very sweet," Derek said, his tone making it clear he thought it was anything but. "But feelings don't change the law. You're not a blood relative, so you have no claim to the estate." I tried to argue with them, but they just kept shutting me down. They'd bring their friends over to look at the house, real estate agents, potential buyers, and every time they'd introduce me as just someone who used to live here, or a family friend who's helping clean out the house. I felt so small, so invisible, like I didn't matter at all. The worst part was when they started going through my grandmother's things. They'd just toss stuff in garbage bags without even looking at it. Photo albums, her jewelry, books she'd collected over the years. I tried to ask if I could keep some of the pictures, just the ones with me and her together, and Linda actually said, "What would you want with those? You're not even really in the family." I started having panic attacks. I'd wake up at night feeling like I couldn't breathe, like the walls were closing in. I was working part-time at a coffee shop, barely making enough to cover my basic expenses, and I knew I'd need to find a new place to live soon. But apartments were so expensive, and I didn't have money for a security deposit. My coworkers noticed I was struggling. Sarah, who worked the morning shift with me, kept asking if I was okay. I finally broke down and told her everything. About my grandmother, about the house, about my cousins treating me like I was nothing. "That doesn't sound right," she said, frowning. "Are you sure there wasn't a will?" "Most people have some kind of will, especially older people." "They said they looked everywhere," I replied. "And honestly, I wouldn't even know where to start. I can't afford a lawyer, and even if I could, what would I tell them? My cousins are probably right, I'm not blood family." But Sarah wouldn't let it go. She kept bringing it up, kept saying something felt off about the whole situation. Finally, she said she had a friend who was a paralegal, and maybe she could give me some advice for free. I was reluctant at first. I mean, what was the point? I'd already accepted that I was going to lose the house, lose all connection to my grandmother's memory. I was just trying to figure out how to move forward. But Sarah was persistent. She gave me her friend's number and basically made me promise to call. So I did. Her name was Maria, and she was really nice. She listened to my whole story without interrupting, and when I was done, she was quiet for a long moment. "Honey," she said finally, "I think you need to talk to an actual lawyer. What you're describing, it doesn't add up. First of all, the fact that you lived with your grandmother for 6 years, that could establish you as a dependent. And the whole step-granddaughter thing? That's not how inheritance law works. If your father was legally adopted by your grandmother's husband, or if there's any documentation showing she considered you her granddaughter, you absolutely have standing." My heart started racing. "But I don't have money for a lawyer." "Let me make some calls," Maria said. "I know someone who might be willing to take your case on contingency. That means you don't pay unless you win." I didn't want to get my hopes up. I'd been disappointed so many times already, but there was this tiny spark of something. Maybe hope. Maybe just desperation. I agreed to let her reach out. Meanwhile, things at the house were getting worse. Derek and Linda had basically moved in, acting like they owned the place. They'd changed the locks without telling me, so I had to knock on the door of my own home. Well, what used to be my home. When I showed up one morning to continue packing my things, Linda answered the door with this annoyed expression. "What do you want now?" she asked. "I just need to get some of my clothes," I said. "And maybe a few more of my grandmother's photos, if that's okay." She rolled her eyes. "Make it quick. We have the appraiser coming at 11, and we don't need you getting in the way." Getting in the way. Those words stung every time, like I was some kind of obstacle instead of a person who was grieving. I went upstairs to what used to be my room. They'd already started packing up my things, just throwing everything into boxes without any care. I found some of my clothes wadded up with random kitchen items. It was like they couldn't even be bothered to treat my belongings with basic respect. As I was folding my clothes properly, I could hear them downstairs talking to someone. The appraiser, probably. I caught fragments of their conversation. "Beautiful original features. Prime location. Should sell quickly in this market." Each word felt like a knife. They were talking about my grandmother's house like it was just another piece of property to flip, like it didn't have 50 years of memories soaked into the walls. I was trying not to cry when I heard a knock at the front door. Heavy, authoritative knocking. Not the gentle tap of a friend or the casual rap of a family member. This was someone who meant business. I crept to the top of the stairs and listened. "Good morning," I heard a woman's voice say. "I'm looking for Derek and Linda Morrison." "That's us," Derek replied, and I could hear the confusion in his voice. "Can we help you?" "My name is Margaret Chen. I'm an attorney representing the estate of Eleanor Morrison." Eleanor Morrison. That was my grandmother's name. The silence that followed was deafening. I held my breath, pressing myself against the wall so I wouldn't be seen. I'm sorry, Linda said finally, her voice suddenly much higher than usual. There must be some mistake. We're Eleanor's relatives. We're handling her estate. Are you? Margaret Chen's voice was calm, professional, but there was something steel-hard underneath it. Because according to the documentation I have here, you may have been acting without proper authority. I couldn't see what was happening, but I could practically feel the tension in the room. I don't understand, Derek said. There was no will. We checked. Actually, there was a will, Margaret replied. Properly executed and witnessed. It was filed with the probate court just yesterday. My heart was pounding so hard I was sure everyone could hear it. A will? My grandmother had left a will? That's impossible, Linda said. We looked everywhere. We went through all her papers. The will was kept in a safety deposit box at First National Bank, Margaret explained, along with several other important documents. I'm here today to inform you that you are currently occupying property that does not belong to you. Now wait just a minute, Derek said, and I could hear the anger building in his voice. Even if there is a will, we're her closest living relatives. We have a right to contest it. You're absolutely free to contest it, Margaret said smoothly. But until you do so successfully, you'll need to vacate the premises. The property has been left to someone else. The silence stretched on forever. I was barely breathing. Left to who? Linda asked, her voice barely above a whisper. To her granddaughter. The person you've been referring to as just a family friend. I must have made some kind of sound because suddenly everyone was looking up at me. I was standing at the top of the stairs, tears streaming down my face, staring down at this woman who looked like she'd just performed a miracle. Margaret Chen was younger than I'd expected, maybe in her late 30s, with kind eyes and a confident posture. She smiled up at me. You must be Sarah, she said. I've been looking forward to meeting you. My name isn't Sarah, but I was too shocked to correct her at first. Then I realized she was talking to me like she knew me, like she'd been expecting to find me here. I don't understand, I managed to say. Why don't you come downstairs? Margaret suggested. We have quite a bit to discuss. I walked down those stairs, feeling like I was in a dream. Derek and Linda were standing in the living room, looking like they'd been hit by a truck. Their faces had gone from smug superiority to shocked disbelief in a matter of minutes. This is impossible, Linda kept saying. There was no will. We looked everywhere. As I explained, Margaret said patiently, the will was in a safety deposit box. Your grandmother was very organized about her affairs. She also left detailed instructions about her wishes for the property and her personal belongings. She handed me a folder. This is your copy of the will and the supporting documents. You'll want to review everything carefully, but the key points are straightforward. You inherit the house, the contents, and a substantial savings account that your grandmother had been building for years. A savings account? My grandmother had money saved? How much? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Margaret smiled. Enough to cover the property taxes for several years and to make any repairs or improvements you might want to make to the house. Derek stepped forward, his face red with anger. This is ridiculous. She's not even family. She's a step-granddaughter at best. Actually, Margaret said, opening her briefcase and pulling out another document, that's not accurate. According to the adoption papers filed in 1987, Eleanor Morrison legally adopted your father when he was 14 years old. That makes you her legitimate granddaughter with full inheritance rights. Adoption papers? I had no idea. My father had died when I was young, and my grandmother had never mentioned anything about adoption. She'd always just called him her son. But even if that's true, Linda said desperately, she can't just kick us out. We have rights. What rights would those be? Margaret asked. You've been living in property that doesn't belong to you, making decisions about assets that aren't yours to make. I could have you arrested for trespassing." The change in Derek and Linda's demeanor was immediate and dramatic. Suddenly, they weren't treating me like I was in the way anymore. Linda actually took a step toward me, her expression shifting to something that was probably supposed to look apologetic. "Listen," she said, her voice suddenly sweet and conciliatory. "We had no idea about any of this. We were just trying to help, you know? We thought we were doing the right thing." Derek nodded eagerly. "Absolutely. We were just looking out for the family. We didn't realize Eleanor had made other arrangements." The family. Now I was family again. "If we'd known," Linda continued, "we would have handled things completely differently. We're so sorry if we made you feel unwelcome." Made me feel unwelcome? They'd literally told me I wasn't part of the family. They'd changed the locks. They'd thrown my belongings around like garbage. But I didn't say any of that. I was still too shocked, too overwhelmed by everything that was happening. Margaret was watching this whole exchange with a slight smile. "I think," she said, "it would be best if you gathered your belongings and vacated the property today. You can make arrangements to retrieve anything else you might have left here, but you'll need to coordinate with the actual owner." She gestured to me. The actual owner. Me. "Of course," Derek said quickly. "Of course. We'll get right on that." Linda was nodding so hard I thought her head might fall off. "We'll be out by this afternoon. And again, we're so sorry for any misunderstanding." Misunderstanding, like they hadn't spent weeks treating me like dirt. After they left, which took about an hour of frantic packing and whispered arguments between them, Margaret and I sat in my grandmother's kitchen. My kitchen now, I guess. "I have to ask," I said. "How did you know to find me? How did you even know I existed?" Margaret smiled. "Your grandmother was very thorough. She left detailed instructions about how to locate you if anything happened to her. She also left a letter." She handed me an envelope with my name written on it in my grandmother's careful handwriting. My hands were shaking as I opened it. "My dearest granddaughter," it began, and I immediately started crying again. "If you're reading this, it means I'm gone, and I hope it also means that Margaret has found you and helped you understand your rights. I want you to know that you were never, ever anything less than my true granddaughter. When I adopted your father, I knew that someday I might have grandchildren, and I promised myself that I would love them completely, just as if they were my own blood." The letter went on to explain that she'd been saving money for years, knowing that the house would need work and that I'd need financial security. She'd put everything in a safety deposit box because she was worried that if anything happened to her, other family members might try to take advantage of the situation. "I knew Derek and Linda would probably show up," she wrote. "They've never shown much interest in me while I was alive, but I suspected they'd be very interested in my house after I was gone. I wanted to make sure you were protected." Protected. She'd been protecting me even after she was gone. Margaret explained that my grandmother had contacted her law firm about 6 months before she died. She'd been having some health issues and wanted to make sure her affairs were in order. She'd been very specific about her wishes and very concerned about what would happen to me. "She talked about you a lot," Margaret said. "She was so proud of you. She said you were the only family member who really cared about her as a person, not just as someone who might leave them money." Over the next few weeks, I learned just how much my grandmother had been planning for my future. The savings account was more substantial than I'd ever imagined. She'd been putting money away for years, living simply so she could leave me something that would give me options. Derek and Linda tried to contest the will, just like Margaret had predicted, but their case was weak, and their lawyer basically told them they were wasting their time and money. The adoption papers were legitimate, the will was properly executed, and there was no evidence of any kind of coercion or mental incapacity. They also tried a different approach. About a month after they'd been kicked out of the house, Derek called me. "Hey there," he said, his voice friendly like we were old buddies. "I was just thinking about you. How are you settling in?" "I'm fine," I said cautiously. "That's great, that's great. Listen, I was thinking, maybe we got off on the wrong foot. I mean, we're family, right? And I feel bad about how things went down." Family. There was that word again. "I was wondering," he continued, "if maybe you'd like to have dinner sometime. Linda and I would love to take you out, get to know you better. We realize we haven't been great relatives and we'd like to make up for that." I almost laughed. Now that I owned property and had money in the bank, suddenly they wanted to be my family. "That's very kind of you," I said, "but I'm pretty busy right now." Of course. But maybe sometime soon? And if you ever need any help with anything, managing the house, dealing with repairs, anything like that, we'd be happy to help out." I bet they would. I bet they'd be very happy to help me manage my inheritance. "I'll keep that in mind," I said, and ended the call. The truth is, I didn't need their help. Margaret had connected me with a good financial advisor and a reliable handyman. I was learning to manage my own affairs, probably for the first time in my life. But the best part wasn't the money or the house, although those were incredible gifts. The best part was understanding, finally, how much my grandmother had loved me, how much she'd thought about my future and worked to protect me. I found more evidence of her planning as I went through her things properly. She'd kept every card I'd ever sent her, every photo we'd taken together. She'd written down my work schedule so she'd know when to call me. She'd even researched the coffee shop where I worked and left a note in her papers, saying she was proud of me for working hard and supporting myself. In her bedroom, I found a journal she'd kept for the last few years of her life. Most of the entries were pretty mundane. Doctor's appointments, grocery lists, notes about the weather. But scattered throughout were entries about me. "Sarah called today. She sounded tired. I worry she's working too hard. Sarah helped me plant the new roses in the back garden. She has such a gentle way with plants. She reminds me of myself at that age. Sarah graduated from college today. I'm so proud of her. She's the first person in our family to get a degree." Sarah. She called me Sarah in her journal, just like she called me Sarah in person. Never step-granddaughter or my stepson's daughter. Just Sarah. Just her granddaughter. I also found a folder of legal documents that showed just how much she'd been planning. She'd researched inheritance law, talked to multiple lawyers, even looked into setting up a trust fund. She'd been protecting me for years, and I'd had no idea. The house needed work, but it was good work. Necessary work, not emergency repairs. The roof needed some attention, and the electrical system was old, but the foundation was solid. I hired contractors and supervised the work myself, learning about things like permits and inspections and quality control. It felt good to take care of the house, like I was taking care of my grandmother's memory, and also like I was taking care of myself. I kept working at the coffee shop for a while, but eventually I was able to quit and focus on other things. I started taking classes at the community college, just for fun at first. Art classes, history classes, literature classes, all the things I'd never had time for when I was just trying to survive. Derek and Linda kept trying to reconnect with me for a few months. They'd call on my birthday, send Christmas cards, invite me to family gatherings I'd never been invited to before. But their sudden interest in me was so transparently fake that I couldn't take it seriously. Linda even tried to get me to feel sorry for her at one point. She called me crying, saying she and Derek were having financial trouble and could really use some help. She said she was sorry about how they'd treated me, and that they'd learned their lesson. "I just thought," she said through her tears, "since we're family, and since you're doing well now, maybe you could help us out? Just a loan. We'd pay you back." "I'm sorry you're having trouble," I said, and I meant it. I didn't wish financial hardship on anyone. But I'm not in a position to help. Which was true in a way. I wasn't in a position to help people who had treated me like garbage and were now only interested in me because I had money. But Sarah, she said, we're family. Family helps family. You're right, I said. Family does help family. I'm just not sure when you started considering me family. She didn't have an answer for that. The funny thing is, I did end up helping family. Real family. I reconnected with some of my father's other relatives, people who had actually stayed in touch with me over the years, who had come to my grandmother's funeral and offered their condolences. People who had never made me feel like I was just a step anything. My Uncle Tom, my father's brother, had been struggling to pay for his daughter's college tuition. I was able to help him out, and it felt amazing, like I was using my grandmother's gift the way she would have wanted me to. I also started volunteering at a local senior center. I'd read to the residents, help them with letter writing, just spend time with them. It was my way of honoring my grandmother's memory, and it made me feel connected to something bigger than myself. About a year after everything happened, I ran into Derek at the grocery store. He saw me first, and I watched him debate whether to approach me or pretend he hadn't seen me. Finally, he walked over. "Sarah," he said, putting on that fake friendly smile. "How are you doing?" "I'm doing well," I said. "How are you?" "Oh, can't complain. Listen, I wanted to say again how sorry I am about how things went down. We really didn't know about the will." "I know," I said. "You made that very clear." He shifted uncomfortably. "I hope there are no hard feelings. I mean, we're family, right?" There was that word again. Family. "Derek," I said, "I want to ask you something. If my grandmother hadn't left me anything, if there had been no will and no inheritance, would you be standing here talking to me right now?" He opened his mouth to answer, then closed it again. We both knew the answer. "I didn't think so," I said gently. "Take care of yourself, Derek." I walked away feeling lighter than I had in years. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't hurt. I was just free. That night, I sat in my grandmother's rocking chair, my rocking chair, and looked through her photo albums. There were pictures of me at every age, from baby photos to my college graduation. Pictures of us baking together, gardening together, just sitting and talking together. In one photo, I was maybe 8 years old, and I was helping her plant flowers in the front yard. We were both covered in dirt, and we were laughing about something. On the back, she'd written, "Sarah and me, Spring 1998. My little helper." My little helper, not her step-granddaughter's little helper, just her little helper. I realized that my grandmother had been trying to tell me something important through her actions, through her planning, through her love. She'd been trying to tell me that I mattered, that I belonged, that I was worth protecting and caring for. For so long, I'd let other people define my worth. I'd let Derek and Linda convince me that I was just in the way, that I didn't really belong, that I wasn't really family. But my grandmother had seen something different. She'd seen me as someone worth fighting for, even after she was gone. The house is beautiful now. I've painted the walls in colors my grandmother would have loved, soft yellows and warm blues. I've planted new flowers in the garden, and I've learned to cook some of her favorite recipes. I've made the house mine while still honoring her memory. People sometimes ask me if I'm lonely, living in such a big house by myself. But I'm not lonely. I'm peaceful. I'm home. And sometimes when I'm sitting in the kitchen in the evening, looking out at the garden, I swear I can feel my grandmother's presence, like she's sitting there with me, proud of what I've become, proud that I finally understand how much I was loved. Derek and Linda still send me Christmas cards every year. They probably always will. They still think that someday I might need their help, might want to be part of their version of family. But I've learned something important about family. Real family doesn't disappear when times get tough. Real family doesn't suddenly show up when there's money involved. Real family loves you when you have nothing to offer, except yourself. My grandmother gave me more than a house and a bank account. She gave me the knowledge that I was loved, that I mattered, that I was worth fighting for. And that's a gift I'll carry with me for the rest of my life. Sometimes I think about what would have happened if Margaret had never shown up that day. If my grandmother hadn't been so careful about her planning, so determined to protect me. I probably would have moved out, found some tiny apartment I could barely afford, and spent the rest of my life believing that I wasn't really worth much to anyone. But she did show up. My grandmother did protect me. And now I know the truth about who I am and what I'm worth. They said I was in the way, but it turns out I was exactly where I belonged all along.